Is this Liz on the phone?
This is Liz.
This is Liz. Well, I can't wait. I hope when you get a chance to come into town tomorrow. Right now, my people are talking to your people. And
I didn't know I had multiple people.
Yeah, we have people. Yeah, there's the thing.
Good.
Well, before I go ahead well, I hope that you get a chance because the studio. Last time you were in here, the studios were being built. Now they're finished.
Oh, great.
So it looks good in here. But yeah, I got to ask you this question before I get into the interview segment. Now that I have people, they keep like primping me. I mean, they keep like buying me clothes and getting me haircuts and telling me what I'm supposed to wear and what I'm supposed to say. Are your people doing that to you too?
Hey, no, they tried, but I said I'm going to be myself, and so I think you got to stick to your guns on that.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you there.
And you got a lot of personal style. So
well, see, there's what happened. They told me what you got to do, Glenn, is you got to grow the goatee thing back. So I did, and immediately stepped out into public, and a bunch of women looked at me and went, "Oh." So I think I'll give up on it. I'm just taking over like you did. I'm going back to all right. So where are you right now? I know you're coming into Gillette tomorrow, but where are you on the campaign trail?
I'm over in Cody today.
Okay.
And we're here for they've got a medical foundation benefit tonight. So having a chance to talk to people in Cody and then go into that benefit before we head over to Gillette.
Now, before I get into some of the policy questions, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, we're a little out from the actual hard campaign. I mean, it's like a real sprint as you get closer to the end of it. But what's your travel schedule like?
Well, we are on the road pretty much constantly. I announced the campaign on July 17th, and since then we've traveled over 11,000 miles around the state.
Wow.
And that's pretty much the pace I would imagine we'll keep up, if not, increasing it even more.
Well, of course, in Wyoming, 11,000 miles is going to the grocery store, but all right.
Well, that's true. It's a different perspective.
Let's talk some policy things. Something I've been really hot on the past since yesterday. So we're supposed to believe they didn't raise the debt limit. Instead, what they did was they suspended the debt limit, and I see no difference whatsoever. What's your take on that?
No, listen, I agree with you. I see three big problems in terms of, what I've seen about this deal that they reached a couple days ago. The first one is just kicks the can down the road, as you pointed out. Secondly, it doesn't seem to do anything about the special deal that the senators and the congressmen and their staff get on Obamacare. That subsidy is still in place. And, I really believe Senator Enzi and the others ought to stand up and pledge that they're going to return that subsidy to the U.S. Treasury. It's just, indefensible to have our Congress passing laws that, inflict real pain on people around the country, and particularly here in Wyoming, where our premiums are going to be higher than any other state, it looks like, under Obamacare. And they don't have to live under the law themselves. That's just wrong. And I'd like to see that changed immediately. I'd like to see that money, they should pledge that they're going to return the money to the Treasury. In addition, we see, it looks like, pork in this piece of legislation. And for folks, for the Congress to get to the point where we're at a crisis, we're governing from crisis to crisis, and the only way out of the crisis is, a resolution that includes $3 billion, it looks like, for a dam that benefits Mitch McConnell and others. It just is outrageous. And
now,
frankly,
I was reading that just before I came on the air, and I didn't get a chance to really take a good look at it. Is that dam basically like that Alaskan bridge to nowhere?
I think that it's in fact a real dam, and
Okay.
I think it's a project that Mitch McConnell has been advocating funding for many years, and he's not the only one. Lamar Alexander and others, but. Having said that, it's just fundamentally, I just think, an affront to the American people. When you're in this kind of a crisis situation, Congress can't do the job that we sent them there to do. All they can seem to do is careen from crisis to crisis. And then the resolution of the whole thing is $3 billion in pork. It's really, really offensive. And it's a sign to me that it's time for change.
Well, now, it looked to me, when I was talking about this for about the past half hour just before you came on, it looked to me that the Republicans completely caved on everything that they were after. They wanted to defund Obamacare. That's not happening. I mean, run the list. There's nothing that the Republicans were asking for. Spending cuts didn't happen. We're spending more. What would you have done differently?
No, there's nothing. I think you're right. I think it was a complete capitulation. There are a number of things I would have done differently. First of all, I would not have participated in the Gang of Six when Obamacare first got underway. Senator Enzi, he's a nice man. I think that we ought to thank him for his service to the state, but I think that people got real concerns about things like his role in giving the president cover throughout a large part of 2009 when Obamacare was being developed and designed. Senator Enzi was one of the few Republicans willing to negotiate with the White House over Obamacare. And, I think clearly we should have opposed it from the very beginning. We shouldn't have allowed the president to say that he had bipartisan support for the effort because, he's pointing to people like Mike Enzi who were helping to negotiate this whole deal. And I think we may well not have found ourselves in the situation we're in today if, in fact, we hadn't had the Gang of Six at the very beginning of this, if everybody had been opposed to it. I also think as Republicans we've got to be able to fight harder and smarter. And, what's happening too often in Washington today is Republicans who are afraid to stand up for our values, Republicans who are afraid to stand up for fundamental freedom. There are just too few of them in Washington, and too much of the sort of go along to get along crowd, people who don't want to rock the boat. And, the problem is when you have a president as radical as this one, if you go along to get along, then you're complicit in helping to put policies in place that are really going to damage the nation. So I think that all across the board, we should have been fighting harder, and I certainly would have made a stand. I think if the Republicans had wanted to be successful, they could have made a stand on the special deal. And if they'd stood up, as a group and pledged to return their subsidy money to the Treasury, they would have gotten a huge amount of support across the country on a bipartisan basis. That's not a Democratic issue or Republican issue. People want Congress to live by the same laws that they impose on all of us. And that would have been a great way. And Speaker Boehner attempted this at one point. He had the special deal in one version of his continuing resolution, but we should have made that the place where we made our stand and used the momentum from that to help push back and delay the implementation of other aspects of Obamacare.
Well, now let me jump to Obamacare, because while you were talking about that, I was thinking about a part of this whole, and let's face it, it was never a government shutdown. It was a partial slowdown at best. I came across a number of about 17% of the federal government actually went home, and even then they come back and get their full pay and benefits like they were on a 2-week vacation. So, but how part of this was over Obamacare. So would you try to defund it, or would you try to get rid of it entirely? What would you do about Obamacare?
Well, I think you have to start from the proposition that Obamacare is, a massive train wreck. And even people like Max Baucus, Democrats who supported it, have now said they realize it's a train wreck. And the president has been, in what I believe is a very unconstitutional set of moves, delaying parts of the bill. He doesn't want to have to implement the employer mandate, and he doesn't want to have to implement the small business exchanges. So even though there's a deadline in the law, he's ignoring it and pushing those off. And I think that Republicans should have used that more effectively as a way to begin to really push through, on this issue of, let's try to delay, for example, the employee mandate, delay the individual mandate. If the president can choose pieces of it to delay that he wants, let's delay other parts of it and use the period of that delay, frankly, then to get some better people elected, and to get into a place where we can move to repeal it, to defund it. I just think it's such a dangerous law, and it's going to have such a devastating effect across the board on jobs, on taxes, on health care, on the cost of insurance, that we as Republicans need to do everything possible to try to stop its implementation.
Well, now, there are those in the Republican Party that are saying in order to repeal Obamacare, the Republicans are going to have to come up with something as an alternative proposal. But I look at an alternative proposal as, what you're asking for then is still more government. I mean, I'm a very small government guy. I would rather that the alternative proposal be the free market. Would you propose something alternative, or would you head for a free market solution?
No, listen, I think it's very important when we talk about repealing Obamacare that Republicans are able to say what should replace it, because I think clearly, healthcare costs in this country are out of control. But I'm with you in terms of what the solution should be. I think we ought to start by letting people purchase insurance across state lines. Let the market forces be reflected in the kind of policies those providers offer to people. And if you're able to choose across state lines, then the burden is on the insurance companies to make their policies affordable and appealing to people. And, the market is the best way to try to keep those costs down. I'd also look at things like tort reform. I think obviously malpractice insurance, and the cost of having to operate as a physician, those things just get out of control in part because of trial lawyers and because of medical malpractice suits that are being brought. So, I think there are a number of things we could do to begin to help improve, the cost of health care in this country. What I wouldn't want to do is this kind of massive new entitlement, this kind of government takeover. And in particular, if you look at things like the tax on medical devices in Obamacare, my dad is alive today because of medical innovation and medical devices that were developed in this country, because we've got such an incredible, system that allows us to sort of be at the cutting edge of medical care. And I think we don't want to ever do anything that limits that innovation or discourages it. And so I certainly wouldn't want to see the kind of tax on devices that currently is in Obamacare.
Well, if your people and my people are able to get together, you'll have a chance to swing on in here for a few minutes, and I can interview you again tomorrow. Running a little bit.
I look forward to it.
Well, and run a little bit out of time, but think about this, because I would really like to talk to you about the energy industry tomorrow, because I look at right now an out of control EPA and BLM, and even this partial government slowdown that we just had actually did hurt quite a few people who were not allowed to work because of all of the government bureaucracy that they have to deal with just to do their job day to day. And so in a state like Wyoming, we're slowing down to a crawl at this point because of all the government interference from the EPA and the BLM and other, the Interior Department, and the agencies go on and on and on. So I'd love to have a nice long conversation with you about how you deal with those entities.
Well, those are very important issues, and I think that, one of the most important jobs of Wyoming senator, and certainly one of my top priorities, would be fighting hard, number one, on behalf of the coal industry. I think we've got to have a leader in Washington who's going to lead the charge to defeat President Obama's war on coal, and, who's going to fight for our coal industry here in Wyoming, who's going to explain to people across the country that if, they value affordable electricity, they should be on our side in the war on coal, not the president's side. And I think that it takes much more than just saying, I'm going to keep my head down and work behind the scenes. We need a fighter back there. And we got to roll back the authority of all those agencies, and that's got to be job one.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I hope I get a chance to see with you. Your people, my people, we got people. All right.
We got to fire all of our people, and we can just, work on it together.
Okay. All right, Liz. Thanks for coming back on.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.